Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to Recording Co-Hosts, Guests, and Telephone Interviews. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and I am super excited to bring this video tutorial to you. You might ask yourself, what's the difference between a co-host, a guest, and an interviewee? Well, you probably know the difference between a co-host, but what about this guest and interviewee situation? Why is there a distinction? Let me talk to you about what each of these are as far as how I define them. I consider a co-host to be someone who is a normal part of your show, whereas a guest is someone who may be on your show occasionally or just once, but not for the purpose of an interview. So, for example, if you listen to Podcast Answer Man, one of the recurring guests on my show is Eric J. Fisher. He is my social media correspondent for Podcast Answer Man. And as such, I consider him not as a co-host. He co-hosts a segment, but really he is a recurring guest on my show. So that'll help you understand what I consider to be a guest. And then, of course, is an interviewee is someone who is coming onto your show to be interviewed, usually a one-time event, although you can have a recurring person come on for multiple interviews over time, of course. Now, why do I make a distinction between those three individuals? I believe that there are different expectations when it comes to audio quality when it comes to those three individuals, and they are different. In fact, I'm going to talk to you right now about the acceptable audio quality for each of these individuals. First, we'll discuss the co-host. I believe that every co-host should sound as good as the host of the show, if at all possible. This means that, if you have a guest in the studio with you, or if you have a co-host in the studio with you, it's a good idea to make sure that you have the same quality microphone, that you both use the same kind of mic placement as far as speaking the same distance away from the microphone. You don't want to have one person sound really good and the co-host not sound as good. It's kind of nice to have them have the same kind of audio quality. Now, many of you will have a co-host situation where the person is on via Skype. I have good news. We're going to talk about that. It is possible to have audio quality as good as the host of the show, even though that co-host may be somewhere else. Although it's not always possible. The key here is as close as possible. You simply don't want your co-host to have much less audio quality than what you have as the host of the show. It goes back and forth. If they're a regular part of the show every single week, it can kind of play with people's, they're just listening to it. Of course, I'm an audiophile, and so it means a lot to me, audio quality does. And when I'm listening to a show and there's a co-host situation, I want both of those individuals that are there every single episode to have about the same audio quality. Now, when it comes to having a guest on your show, I believe that the more the guest is on your show, the better their audio quality should be. Now, it is possible to have somebody who is a guest who's only on your show one time. And if that's the case, if their audio quality is not that great, it's not that big of a deal. In fact, if you had somebody on your show and you introduced them and their audio is breaking up really bad and people can just barely hear what they're saying, as long as they're saying something valuable and your audience isn't under the impression that they're going to be back and this is going to be a normal ongoing thing, they'll give you a lot of leeway. However, the more frequent you bring that guest onto the show, the higher their expectation will be for audio quality. And then, of course, the same is true for an interviewee. Now, typically, an interviewee is somebody who you've worked really hard to get onto the show. You really have very little control over, at least with a guest, somebody that you're inviting to participate in the leading of this content that you're creating. With a guest, there's an expectation that you have a little bit more of a pull, if you will, a little bit more of an influence to, hey, I'd really like it if you would maybe not let the kids scream in the background, maybe, have them maybe record at a time when they're sleeping, for example. Whereas with an interviewee, the expectation is not there that you have any control over what that person does, especially if it's a celebrity or somebody that is a A-list interview that you want to have on your show, somebody that's got some valuable information. I can tell you right now, if you had somebody who was a celebrity on your show and their audio quality was absolutely horrendous, they were coming in on a cell phone and the phone call was dropping out, and you missed even 70% of what they were saying, but 30% of what they were saying, but the 70% you got was golden, and your audience is hanging on their every word. That, my friends, I guarantee you that it is possible to put out an episode like that with that interview and not get any negative feedback. And again, it's possible. Some people may complain, but if it's a one-time thing and they have this understanding that, well, there's nothing you could have done to control that, we were just lucky to have this individual, then you can see where between a co-host, a guest, and an interviewee, there are different acceptable audio quality levels for each of those individuals. Now, I do want to tell you that if you're bringing a guest or a co-host in via telephone, it is perfectly acceptable. However, if you are going to have a situation where you have a co-host on your show, I would never recommend that you have your co-host come in by telephone. Now, I have violated this rule myself. I did have a situation where my co-host of a show that I once produced called The Successful Life Mindset, where he was on a lake. He was on vacation with his family on a lake, and he literally just barely could get a signal if he walked up to the highest point out on this hill behind the cottage where he was staying. And he called me and co-hosted the show from that situation. Now, it was a one-time deal, and we did it, and we did not get a single bit of negative feedback. However, it's not something I would ever do again. I would probably say, let's cancel and come back and do this another time, because I do have some control over that. This isn't something where I'm going to lose this opportunity if I say this isn't really up to the standards of what I want. I believe in putting out a quality product, because I believe that every single time somebody listens to single time you produce an episode of your show, it will be somebody's first time they've ever heard you. And I would never want anybody to click play on an episode, hear me in the studio and my co-host through the entire interview or through the entire episode, where we're just chatting, and it becomes very clear that this person isn't just a guest. This person isn't an interviewee. This person is my co-host that we do the show every single week. And unless I actually open up the show with some kind of explanation that this is a one-time thing, it's just not what I want to do. I think you get the understanding. You get the idea of where I'm going with that. All right, so the best situation that you can do, having your co-host, your guest, and or your interviewee in the same studio space that you are in is always going to be the best option. Everybody in the same studio. In fact, if you are in the same studio, you'll probably have a setup something like this, because you have an interviewee, a guest, or a co-host, or maybe you and a co-host have somebody that's coming in to be interviewed. Then you might have 3 microphones connected to a mixer, which is then going out of the mixer into your computer where you're recording in software. Now, of course, you'll go from the tape output of most mixers into the line in input of your computer, which of course is then sending that audio from all 3 microphones into your computer's software that's recording, whatever software you might be using. All right. Now, some of you have a computer today where you only have one 1/8 inch port, and it's only a headphones jack. There is no microphone port. There is no line in port. And for those of you, I have a solution. An iMic USB sound card. You just simply plug this into the USB port on the back of your computer, and then it gives you a line in and it gives you a line out. So basically, you're going to bring the audio from the tape out of most mixers, and then it's going to come into the in port on this little USB audio card, and that's what's going to send the audio into your computer software that's going to record the whole thing. I have an affiliate link down there if you're interested in one of those devices. It's gspn.tv/iMic, I-M-I-C. All right, here is another in-studio setup, very similar, although this time I'm showing you recording into a digital audio recorder. So same thing, you have 3 microphones there on the left going into 3 different XLR mic ports, going from the tape out of the mixer into the line in port of a digital audio recorder. This is the way that I prefer to record things. That way I don't have to worry about computer software crashing on me ever. I know that computers are pretty reliable today, but I just like to be safe. That's why I use a digital audio recorder. Another thing that you'll notice real quickly there is that I threw an iPad mini up there using sound clip software called Soundbite. And by the way, if you look for this in the App Store, it is Soundbite, 2 words, Soundbyte. It is not iSoundbite. iSoundbite, made by the same company, is a remote control for a desktop version of the software. But anyway, I'm using the Soundbite application on my iPad, which of course lets me bring in audio from the headphone jack of my iPad mini and bring that into my mixer, which of course means that I could do my interview with myself, my co-host, and we could have our interviewee in studio, and I could be playing my audio clips all at the same time getting recorded into my digital audio recorder. Now, if I go back a slide here, actually 2 slides, I could put the iPad mini in this situation where I'm recording into computer software as well. I just didn't do that I don't know why I didn't. But anyway, I could put that iPad in here and bring those audio clips into the mixer for recording into the computer software as well. So you could have done it either way. All right, so I want to give you some tips if you're going to be recording with everybody in the studio. And some of these tips, of course, will apply to co-hosts and guests and interviewees on via Skype and other ways as well. And I'm sure you'll figure out which ones you want to apply there. But here's some tips. First and foremost, have everyone turn off their cell phones. Sometimes they cause interference in the recording equipment, which could cause a buzzing and a humming sound. Sometimes phones just get text messages and phone calls and stuff like that, and you want to try to avoid as many interruptions as possible. Of course, with our audio recordings and everything like that, we can do editing and post-production to take things out, but of course we want to make that as easy as possible. So let's have everyone turn off their cell phones. The next one is you can give instructions to everyone to speak directly into the microphone. All right, here is the reason why. I'm going to continue to talk, and I'm going to talk with the same voice, and I'm giving you the same volume. The only difference between what you're hearing right now and what you're hearing right here is the fact that right here I'm on the microphone, and here I just turned my mouth away from the microphone, probably just about 30 degrees. So it's not very much at all, but there's a big difference between this audio and this audio right here. And so having everybody stay in front of the microphone, it's something that you want to inform them about before you hit the record button. Of course, if they're in studio, you can use hand gestures. If somebody's getting a little too far away from the microphone and you can see that, you might want to come up with a hand gesture that, it's like, dude, get behind the microphone again, please. Another thing that could help is having everyone in the studio wear headphones so that they can actually hear when their audio is much less because they've gone off the microphone. And having headphones, also if you're playing audio clips into your recording live while you're recording, they can hear those clips as well. So I like to have everyone wearing headphones if possible. And then, of course, you can instruct everyone to not touch the microphone. And if you don't have a good shock mount, you might want to instruct them to not really touch the table that the microphone is sitting on. You'll get used to this. You'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so that was the in studio. Everyone is in the studio with you setup. Now let's talk about what if somebody is not in studio? What is the next best way to get audio where it sounds like the person is in the studio with you? And that option is where you in your studio and the other person in their studio both have what's known as an ISDN audio codec. Now, this video that I'm going to play for you here, it's just a short little audio or little video clip that I took from a podcast from many years ago called System. It's episode number 4, and let me just play a little video clip here. This is Leo Laporte talking about how he uses an ISDN codec.
We're in the attic of an old bed and breakfast Victorian building. And I do the KFI radio show from here, and that's how we started with TWiT.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of equipment when we first started doing it. In fact, to do the radio show, all I really need is, and all I really had to begin with, is this headset mic. So, and you have to have headphones anyway. But the radio show, I use this, and then I use this. This is an ISDN codec, they call it. This is the Zephyr from Telos. And what this, actually, it's kind of neat. It's amazing. All you really need is a 164 kilobit ISDN line. I don't even use both channels. And this compresses my audio into AAC, sends it down the line to Los Angeles, where they have the same box on the other end, decompresses it,
right.
And it does it fast enough that I can do live talk radio.
Yeah,
very little latency.
I used ISDN for internet way back.
Yeah.
But why not use the internet though?
Well, because it's a direct point-to-point connection, so you're guaranteed the 64 kilobits. There's no latency,
no hops,
no interference. So yeah, it's not a lot of bandwidth, but it's not about bandwidth. It's about the quality of the signal.
Right.
So for the radio show, I use the headset mic, and then I use this compact flash recorder. The whole idea is it records onto a compact flash. Now this is a gigabyte flash. We can get 3 hours of uncompressed wave on it. Very good quality.
All right, so there you go. That is the ISDN codec. That's the first place I had ever heard about it. And I just want to tell you, this is the option that many professional radio broadcasters use to connect to their radio stations. That you've got somebody like a Leo Laporte who drives a massive, massive audience, and radio stations will do anything to have him produce his radio show there. And Leo's got to the place where, I really don't want to drive to a radio station. I'd rather just be able to sit here in my cottage, if you will, or in my own studio that I have built for myself, and you can just patch me in. Well, patching somebody into a radio station that's nationally syndicated, it has to sound really good, just like they're in the studio, and it has to be super reliable. And that, my friends, is where the ISDN audio codec comes in. Now, this is a very expensive solution. It does require that both ends have to have an ISDN connection to the internet, and they both have to have ISDN audio codec hardware for sending the signal or compressing the signal and then uncompressing the signal on the other end. Also, it allows for nearly in-studio audio quality. It's just like you were there. And if you want more information about this beyond this slide, you can go to podcastanswerman.com/ISDN guide, and that will send you off to somewhere else on the internet that can tell you a little bit more about that. Instead, my friends, we are going to be talking about the solution. Now, of course, I said in studio is the way that I would prefer to go. If everybody could just fly in and come into studio every time I was going to do an interview, if every co-host, if every guest could just come into the studio, wow, life would be grand. Audio quality would always be super amazing. And of course, it's just simply not practical for me to have an ISDN line here and then expect all my co-hosts and guests and interviewees to have an ISDN line on their end. So we go to the next best solution, which is Skype to Skype connections. And I've had some amazing luck with Skype. In fact, I've always had really great connections for Skype when it comes to Skype. And of course, your mileage may vary. But I will tell you, it allows for unbelievable audio quality if all conditions are just right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you an audio clip, and I want you to just listen to myself talking, and the other person that's talking with me is my co-host for a show that I used to do called Balanced Living Weekly. And this is a audio clip where he is my co-host, and just listen to the two of us talking on the side. So I was able to still maintain margin even while at a conference, not worrying about things, and my business is running just as if I was at home.
That is awesome. I'm surprised actually, because it's so much of what you do is done in your home studio and surrounded by all your gadgets and technology and computers. How did you manage that? You took like a laptop with you?
I took my MacBook Air. Matter of fact, I did not even take my iPad with me. So there you go. Now, here's the situation. I am in Hebron, Kentucky, and Father Roderick in that call is in Amersfoort in the Netherlands, a.k.a. Holland. That's right. He is in Europe. I'm in the United States. And that, my friends, was how awesome our audio quality was. He is my co-host, and his audio sounds just as good as my audio. That is what I want to go for. Now, let me tell you, Skype doesn't always perform this way. And there's oftentimes various technical glitches or hurdles that you may have to overcome. The big thing that I want to tell you is that Skype will tell you on their website that you need a minimum of 100 kilobytes per second of upload and 100 kilobytes per second of download speed. Forget what they say. If you want to be able to get the audio quality that I had there with Father Roderick, you're going to need a minimum of a half a megabyte up and a half a megabyte down. Guaranteed minimum. Now, if you have 300 kilobytes per second up, you'll be okay. It may not sound as good as what you just heard there just a moment ago, but it will be much better than if you only have 100. If you have 100 kilobytes or just 200 kilobytes, you'll get connected to the person on Skype, but it isn't going to be really wonderful. All right. And if you want to find out what your upload and download speeds are, I encourage you to check out testmy.net. Testmy.net. And for heaven's sakes, please do not use video on either end of Skype when you're recording an audio interview. Video will eat up your bandwidth. Even if you have 500 kilobits per second, so much of that bandwidth is going to be taken up by video if you are sending video to each other. So just have everybody turn off their cameras, and you should be able to get some really good audio quality there. All right, and of course, the equipment requirements as far as the other people on Skype are minimal. All right, so equipment requirements are minimal for the other person on Skype. In fact, let's look at some of the options for equipment for the folks who are the other end. Now, this is for the person who is your co-host. This is the person who is your guest. This is the person who is your interviewee. What do they need on their end? Option number one, built-in computer microphone. Something that's built in, that little tiny dot that's built into the laptop of their MacBook or their Lenovo laptop or whatever the thing is. That right there is one option. The only people I would ever allow to get by with this is an interviewee. And even for myself, even with an interviewee, unless it was a celebrity, unless it was an A-lister or a B-plus lister, if they called me with a built-in microphone, I would probably reschedule the interview. Although you may sometimes be in a place where this is what you get. The most common problems with the built-in microphone are fan noises from the laptop and just the overall echo noises of the room that surrounds them, because it picks up everything. And heaven forbid, oh my gosh, they type on the keyboard while they're talking with you. That's the most horrible thing. Option number two is what many guests and interviewees will be using when they connect to you via Skype on their end. They'll just simply have a USB headset that they plug in, a little headphones with a little boom microphone off to the side. My recommendation is to tell them to place that microphone, point it down under their chin. Otherwise, you'll get spit noises and popping peas, or if they put it up too close to their nose, you'll get breathing noises. Kind of just have them point that under their chin. But anyway, this is a decent option as on a scale of, by the way, the built-in microphone on a scale of 1 to 10, everything is where 10 is the best. On a scale of 1 to 10, the built-in microphone is going to give you about a 1 to 2. And 2 is the max, greatest on a built-in microphone. Option number 2 here, the headset going into a computer. You can actually have a co-host or a guest or an interviewee come in right around a 4 to a 6, depending on the situation. And I really probably wouldn't want to have a co-host come in via USB on the other side. But certainly a guest or an interviewee would be perfectly fine. And I have had situations where I had a co-host that just didn't have the funds for anything more than a USB headset, and so we did that for a while, and it worked. But it's not what I would want. It's certainly not what I would actually ever do again in the future. Just because today there's a lot more podcasts out there, and we want to stand out among the crowd. So. Anyway, this is an option for the other party, especially guests and interviewees. In fact, you could just have a box and ship this off to somebody and say, hey, I'm going to ship this to you, and I need you to, it's going to have instructions with it on how to install Skype, and looking forward to talking to you at our scheduled time. Option number 3 is using an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 plugged right into your computer. The reason why I chose this microphone is it sounds really good. And at the time that I'm recording this, which is right around the end of May 2013, you can pick this up for $40 on Amazon. If you go to gspn.tv/Amazon ATR 2100, this microphone does both XLR, professional cable to plug into a mixer, and it also comes with that cable. It also comes with a USB cable, so you can actually plug it right into your computer if you want. You could actually send this microphone. By the way, I would actually get a foam windscreen to go over top of it as well. You could ship one of these microphones over to them for $40, and of course they would probably. Well, it comes with a little tiny mic stand if they come down close to it. This is a really good sound. It can provide a very good sound, in fact. Now, here's something you didn't expect to see. Option number 4 for your guest or your interviewee on the other side. Do they have an iPad? If so, the built-in microphone on an iPad is pretty amazing. It really is. If they go into a quiet room and they just hold the iPad in front of them just as if they were reading a book on the Kindle app about that distance, they're going to come through and they're going to sound pretty darn good. On a scale of 1 to 10, by the way, the ATR 2100, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can get around a 7 to 8 with that. On a Skype with built-in microphone built into the iPad, you can get about a 6 or a 7 audio quality out of a Skype with just the built-in mic. Now, you could also use the earbuds that come with an iPad and plug that in, and the little microphone that's built into the earbuds, they could plug that in. On a scale of 1 to 10, though, you've just dropped the audio quality. Where I said before, you could probably get up to I can't remember what I just said, but I'm guessing right around a 6 or a 7. If you plug the earbuds in and use the microphone that's built into the earbuds, you've just dropped the quality down to about a 4. Okay, so I would not recommend doing that. Although, if they have headphones that they can listen to without taking over the internal microphone, that would be great. But actually, Skype and the iPad working together, they have really good noise cancellation, so you won't have any problem with echo. Really, the best solution so far with the iPad is the built-in microphone. That is, of course, unless you have this, which is the camera connection kit. They actually have one that is the Lightning to USB. They also have the 30-pin connector to USB. And as I told you before, the ATR 2100 is a microphone that runs about $40 right now, comes with a USB plug, and you can actually plug your ATR 2100 into the USB port on this cable and plug the other one into your iPad, and then have that person calling you via Skype. This is actually on the other end. They're doing this on the other end. They're calling you with this setup, and it will sound awesome. It is absolutely cool. I mean, it will sound very good. And by the way, this right here, if you have a co-host for your show, this is perfectly acceptable. So you could actually have a co-host if they have an iPad or an iPad mini. You could have them have this set up, and it would be perfectly acceptable as a co-host. The audio quality can be that good. Option number 7 for equipment on the other end, of course, they could have a full equipment setup where they have, 1 or 2 microphones plugged into a mixer. And then, of course, they're bringing the audio from the mixer out to Skype. And, of course, you see that that's not coming from the tape out. Instead, that's going through an auxiliary send out to Skype. And then it's coming back from the computer's headphone jack into line 7, 8. And I'll talk a little bit more about the knobs in just a moment. We'll talk about mix minus. And if you come back to this slide, if you come back to this part of the video later, you'll get to understand what those arrows are pointing up for and the red arrow down and what those knobs are. We'll talk about a mix minus. But just so you know, the other person on the other end could have this kind of equipment. And this is very similar to what Father Roderick had in that audio clip that I played for you earlier. So I had this kind of setup on my end. He had that kind of setup on his end. And that's how, and we both had amazingly high speed, high bandwidth connections to the internet. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is telephone interviews. And if you have to do a telephone interview, my preferred method for doing this would be to use the Skype to telephone option. All right, so Skype does have the functionality to dial out to a regular telephone. You'll see that there's a little dial pad icon, and when you do that, it'll pull up a little dial pad like you see on the screen there. You dial in the 1 plus area code plus the number, and then hit call. And the next thing you know, it is dialing them just as if you were calling somebody on Skype. And so that is another way to connect to a guest or a co-host, or I'm sorry, a guest or an interviewee. I would not use this to connect to a co-host, but you certainly can use this to connect to a guest if it's a one-time guest or something like that. And certainly this is perfectly acceptable for telephone interviews. Now, I will say that several years ago, Skype to telephone connections dropped like all the time. They are very reliable today. I would say that 9 out of 10 people have absolutely no trouble whatsoever when it comes to using Skype to dial out to telephones. 1 out of 10 people do. Usually has something to do with their own hardware or their lack of high bandwidth internet. So their upload speeds are not maybe the half a megabyte up that I had told you about. Again, 300 kilobytes is okay. Probably for a telephone call, it's going to be just fine. But you really want at least 300 kilobits per second, if not 500 or more. All right. Now, I will tell you that the pay-as-you-go option for Skype to telephone is only a few pennies per minute. I believe I looked today as I'm recording this, 2.3 cents per minute. Or you can get an unlimited plan that starts at $2.99 per month here in the United States. That allows us to call anyone in the United States and Canada. So you can find out what plans are available. Just go to gspn.tv/Skype rates. Again, that's gspn.tv/Skype rates, and you can see what plans they have. Also, if you need the ability to have your guest or your interviewee to call you from their telephone, then you can get a Skype number. A Skype number is going to run you about $5 per month. You can find out more information at gspn.tv/Skype number. Again, that's gspn.tv/Skype number. Now, if the person, basically what Skype is going to do is they're going to give you a phone number, and you can actually choose one in your local area. So I live in northern Kentucky, so I would want an 859 area code. And you get to choose your number out of a long list of numbers that are available. And once you find a number that you like, that number is then associated to your Skype account. And anybody who dials that from a regular telephone, it will ring your Skype just as though somebody on the other end of Skype was calling you. It's pretty wild. It's a good situation, a good setup. So my preferred method of recording telephone interviews is Skype to telephone connections. Now, how do we record those Skype connections? Those Skype, who cares if it's actually Skype? The other person's got, the full equipment package. How do we record it if the person has, just the USB headset? Or how do we do it if the person's just called us on our Skype number and now we're connected? I'm on my computer using Skype. They're on the telephone. How do we record this? One way to do this would be to record Skype on your computer. That's right, recording Skype on your computer. Now, if you're a Windows user, the software that I would recommend is called Pamela. In fact, there are various different versions of this software. I believe the professional one is the one that, at least today, May 2013, it's the professional version that will allow you unlimited number of calls and minutes and stuff like that as far as how much it'll record. So I think I looked today, it was like $33 or something like that. Both of these are going to be around that price range. Anyway, Windows users will use Pamela. You can get that at gspn.tv/Pamela. And what that does is you run the software, and when you connect to somebody via Skype, it'll ask you, do you want to record? And it will record an audio file. And then once it's done, you can take that audio file and put it into your editing process. Also, Mac users can use a program called Call Recorder. It's by a company called Ecamm, E-C-A-M-M. The link where you can find that is gspn.tv/call recorder. And again, same thing. You connect with somebody on Skype, and it'll say, hey, do you want to record this? And you click the record button. Now, you can go to their sites and get some help on installing these and configuring the different options and stuff like that. There are just two things that I want to recommend to you. First is, if there's an option to record in either WAV or MP3 or any of that stuff, I highly suggest that you record into WAV format. If you do not have the option for WAV format and you have the option for AIFF or MP3, then choose AIFF. It should be about the same as the WAV uncompressed file. Anyway, if you have to record into MP3, it's not the end of the world. But if you have the option to record in something that is higher quality than an MP3 recording file, then certainly choose that. And of course, both Pamela and Call Recorder allow you to record Skype video conversations. And I highly recommend that you only record audio. Again, remember, we're going for audio podcasting here. We want the highest quality possible, and we do not want to eat up any of our bandwidth and take away our audio quality. So do not record the Skype video. In fact, turn the video off, and you're good to go. That is, by the way, this is the easiest way to record a Skype to Skype interview, a Skype to Skype co-host, a Skype to Skype interviewee, a guest, all that stuff. And it's also the easiest way to record a telephone conversation. Just pull up your Pamela or your Call Recorder software, open up Skype, and dial the phone number, and then it'll ask you, do you want to record this? And you hit record. Single best, easiest way to record a telephone call, recording Skype on your computer using one of these two things. Now, what equipment do you need on the recording end? Let's just assume that you're going to use Call Recorder on the Mac or Pamela on the Windows-based machines. Now, you're obviously going to need some equipment on your end. Option number one, you could use your built-in computer microphone, but nobody, including myself, is going to listen to your podcast. It's going to sound horrible. So forget that. Yes, it's an option, but we're not going there. Yes, you could spend, $35, $25, or even $10 on a USB headset and plug that into your computer, and the Ecamm Call Recorder software or the Pamela software will record that, plus the other person the person at the other end of Skype or the telephone from Skype, no problem at all. And this will give you an audio quality probably around a 4 or 5. It's not going to be the greatest audio quality. Certainly a lot better than a built-in microphone on your computer, though. And then, of course, option number 3, that $40 ATR 2100 microphone, you plug that into your computer. That's going to sound pretty good. You can actually have a call quality there of about a 7, maybe even an 8 in many circumstances. So that would be a very usable solution. And then, of course, option number 4 is you can still record using Pamela or Call Recorder on the computer, And you could use a mixer setup where you have your microphone, or maybe you have more than one microphone going into a mixer. You can have those audio clips coming in, by the way, and Pamela will record, and Call Recorder will record everything you send from the mixer into the computer. So it's very possible for you to use Call Recorder or Pamela and send your audio clips and your microphone from a mixer into your computer. And then it is possible also to record Skype on your digital recorder. Now, this is what I do, my friends. I'm not, in this situation, we are not going to be using our computer to use software to record our Skype conversations. Now, again, if you want the easiest solution that there is, then you would want to just go back a slide and hook up to the computer and let the computer record using Pamela or using Call Recorder, depending on what operating system you have. But this is the way that I record my Skype interviews. And so let me explain to you real quickly what is going on here. All right, I'm going to have a red pen. I have Skype up on my computer. All right, and I have a mixer, and I want everything to go into my digital audio recorder over here on the right-hand side. Now, what I want to go into my digital audio recorder, I have, number one, I have my microphone. Number two, I have my audio clips. And number three, I have Skype. And you can see that I've got a yellow line going from the microphone into the mixer. So that's my yellow. So yellow is my voice. Pink is my audio clips. And then you can see here from number three, blue coming out of the computer and into the mixer. Blue is Skype. All right. So with the setup that I have here in the mixer, all of those things, the yellow, the pink, the blue, the voice, the clips, and Skype, all of it will go out of the tape out, which is right here on the mixer. Okay, I'll just put a big, huge circle. It is all going to go out of the tape out port into the digital audio recorder. So the blue, of course, is Skype is going there. Pink is my audio clips is going there. And yellow, my voice is going there. So by default, everything is hunky-dory. Everything that comes into the mixer goes out the tape out. Everything's getting recorded into the digital audio recorder. Now, the thing is I want the person on Skype to be able to hear me. All right. So again, by the way, before I go to the person on Skype hearing me, I just want to clarify. Remember this. We have the digital audio recorder over here, and the digital audio recorder is actually what's recording Skype. So it's coming out of the computer into the mixer into the recorder. And so that's why I don't need Ecamm software Call Recorder or the Pamela software recorder, because I'm using a digital audio recorder. And I actually go over why I use a digital audio recorder in other tutorials. But let me just say that I do a lot of calls. I do a lot of guests. I do a lot of co-hosts. I do a ton of interviews. And just doing so many of them, even if only 1 out of 100 times there's an issue with recording into a software, it's still too much for me. I've recorded over 3,000 podcast episodes. So you can imagine if there's an issue 1 out of 100 times, that's too many times for me. That's a lot of times I could have had issues. And so I just choose not to record into computer software. And it complicates things just a little bit here, as you're going to see. But it's what I choose to do. All right, so here's what's going on. I already told you, we've already confirmed that the blue audio is from Skype coming from the computer into the recorder. The yellow audio is from the microphone into the digital audio recorder. The pink audio is from the iPad mini with my audio clips going into the digital audio recorder. But we want the person on Skype to be able to hear my voice. And also, I would like the person on Skype to hear my audio clips. But I don't want the person on Skype to hear themselves back. So I don't want to actually bring the audio from the person on Skype into my mixer and have my mixer send the person's voice right back to them so that they hear themselves in an echo with a little bit of a delay, which, by the way, is very discombobulating. All right, so that's what we want to avoid. And that is this thing called the mix minus. All right. We want to send Skype. We want to send the computer. We want to send the person on Skype the entire mix of everything coming into our mixer minus their own signal. All right. So we want to send them the entire mix minus the Skype audio. And so we can do that because down here, this bottom row of knobs, this is what controls the volume of what goes out this tape out port. All right, so these bottom volume knobs control what goes out the tape output. However, we have something called an auxiliary output. So we have the main out, or we actually have the tape out. There's also a main out, but let's just stick with the tape out. We have the tape out, but we also have something called the auxiliary out. All right, the auxiliary output is right here. I'm going to keep drawing a big, huge circle around it. That right there is where the auxiliary output is. And as you can see here, I have demonstrated, I'm showing yellow for my voice is going into Skype. And then do you see that the pink from the audio clips is going to Skype? But do you realize that I do not have a blue arrow coming from the auxiliary send to Skype? And here's why. It has everything to do with the fact that there is an entirely different row of knobs right here called auxiliary knobs. All right, and these auxiliary knobs are for each channel of the mixer. This knob right here, this first one, number 1, that knob is going to control all of the audio from the microphone. This knob, I'm going to go ahead and draw a number 2 right here. So this number 2 knob over here, this is actually going to control the audio that's coming from the sound clips. And then this third one, I'm just going to write a 3 here. And again, I know that the mixer has its own channel numbers, but just for the sake of this demonstration here, I'm going to write a 3. You'll notice that one's turned all the way down. That's because that knob controls what audio is coming from Skype. You can see that that's where I have Skype plugged in. All right, so here's what's going on. What we are doing with this, because this first knob is turned up, we're saying, yes, I want you to take the microphone audio, come down here and send it out the auxiliary output and hit yes. I want that to go to Skype. Let me actually do this in blue. All right, I'm going to do this in blue right here. I'm going to go yes, come into the mixer, and then because that's turned up, it says yes, go out the auxiliary back to the Skype computer. All right, here comes the audio. I'm going to do this in red. I'm going to do this from the iPad mini, bring in our audio clips here, and then this knob says, yep, send that out to the Skype computer. All right, and then the final one, here comes the audio. It's coming from Skype. We're going into the mixer, and then we come down here and we look at this knob and it says, nope, this right here, my friends, this does not go out the auxiliary output. And that's why over here, and I'm going to circle this in blue, that's why up here you'll notice there is no blue arrow coming from that port into Skype. And that's because this knob down here says, no way, you can't do it. Because we told the mixer to send. And of course, what I'll show you here, and I'll do this in blue as well, you'll notice that this is turned up, 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 and then I'll do red here. This one is not. So that means we're sending the entire mix of the mixer minus one of the channels. That's a mix minus, and that allows us to send just some things out the auxiliary output. And that is how we record Skype on our digital audio recorder and still have the person on Skype hearing us from our nice microphone that we have in studio. And that's also how we have our guest, our co-host, or our interviewee who may either be on the other end with Skype on their computer, on their iPad, or they could even be on a telephone. This is how I would use the digital audio recorder to record all of that. This is called, again, the mix minus. All right, so what happens though if you can't use Skype for whatever reason? Let's just say you live out in the country and your internet speed's you've tried Skype and it's just not working for you. But you do have a telephone line, and you do want to actually have telephone interviews. And most of your people are going to call in by telephone. Again, if you can get Skype to work, definitely go Skype. If not, this is an option. And this is exactly the same as the last thing that I showed you just a moment ago. All right, and that is the only thing that's different, and I will circle this in red. The only thing that's different is instead of having a Skype computer connecting to the telephone, we have a digital hybrid telephone interface device. This is actually the JK Audio broadcast host. This requires an analog telephone line. If you happen to have one of those voice over IP telephone systems, then, well, number one, you don't need this because you should be using Skype. If you've got a high enough bandwidth connection to do voice over IP, then use Skype. But otherwise, if you're out in the country and all you have is a regular old standard analog telephone jack, the JK Audio broadcast host is something you can use. In fact, I still have one in my studio. I can click a button, and I can bring in a telephone call. The thing is with the JK Audio broadcast host, and by the way, we're doing a mix minus here too. You know, we're bringing the blue is coming in. Instead of the blue being the Skype audio, it's the telephone audio coming in. And then we're sending auxiliary output, the yellow for my voice. We're sending the pink for the audio clips. And so the person on the telephone, on the other end of the telephone, can hear the audio clips. They can hear my voice, but they're not going to hear their own voice back, which is, again, the whole mix minus. This device right here, as I'm recording this, runs right around $459. It also is terribly staticky. And this is with all telephone interface devices. The only people I know that have been able to isolate the static and all that stuff are radio stations that usually spend a couple $100,000 worth of audio equipment just to have those telephone calls kind of cleaned up a bit. You know, our analog phone system is pretty antiquated, and there's a lot of static on it. So, you know, if you can avoid having to use a digital telephone interface, I would highly recommend it. But if you can't do Skype and Skype's not reliable enough for you, then yes, you can do this. Just know this: if you get a JK Audio broadcast host, you're going to have static on the line, and you may want to use something called a compressor limiter gate. You just really need the gate functionality where you can have it set to where when the person is not talking, it basically cuts out any audio below a certain volume level. So when they're not talking, whatever the volume, let's say if their volume on a scale of 1 to 10, their volume of their voice is about a 7, and the static's down around 2 or 3, then what you can do is the gate will say anything below audio volume 5, don't let that come through. Shut it down and make it silent. And so as soon as the person who has a volume level of 7 is talking and they stop talking, the level of volume coming from the microphone has dropped below 5, and therefore they're still static at 3, but the 3 volume is not high enough to open up the gate. Anyway, that's a whole. This is If you can use Skype, but if you can't, then you would want to try something like a digital hybrid. JK Audio's broadcast host works if you have an analog phone system. Telos makes the Telos 1, the Telos HX1. All of them, I think, pretty much sound pretty much the same. I mean, Telos will tell you differently, and I love those guys over there. They're really awesome people. And but yeah, if you can avoid using this, you should. And if you can't, then you definitely want to make sure that you get a compressor limiter gate. Like the Behringer MDX 4600 or something even more expensive if you want. But the Behringer MDX 4600 is the least expensive one that I'm aware of, and that allows you at least to have, when the person's not talking, this static is not there when you are talking. Otherwise, but the gate does not take away the static when that person is talking. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, good. All right. Moving on, the double ender. This is where each person records their own audio on their end. All right, so let's just say I was going to use the JK Audio broadcast host. All right, and I'm person B. All right, person A and person B. So person A is going to send their audio file to person B, who will do the post-production work. All right, and then person B, who receives the other person's audio file, will match up the two recordings in editing software. So let's just say I live in a rural community, easy for me to say. And I do not have a very good connection to the internet, and I have to do a very important interview. I am going to send a digital audio recorder to person A. All right, and I'm going to give them instructions on what to do. I'm actually going to set all the settings myself before I send it, and I'm going to ship it to them, and I'm going to say, here's what you do. You turn it on and hit the record button once, and it blinks. Hit the record button again, it should go solid. Okay, now just keep that. Make sure that when you talk, are the bars going up and down? What numbers are they going to? I would check all that stuff out. And I say, okay, now just set this on the table in front of you. Don't touch it. Don't touch the table. Don't set anything on the table. And now, basically what I would be doing is I would actually be connecting to them via the telephone. And even to make this as simple as possible, I wouldn't even use a digital hybrid. I wouldn't even go that route. What I would do is I would simply turn my recorder on. I would speak into my microphone, which is going into my mixer, which is going into my digital audio recorder. Or if you want, you could actually just have your microphone, your ATR 2100, plugged in via USB into your computer and having, let's say, Audacity recording your side of the conversation. That's perfectly fine as well. All right, so what's going on is I'm going to, in the studio, speak into my microphone, and my audio is getting recorded, and the person on the other end of the telephone is speaking into the telephone, but the recorder that's sitting on the table in front of them is also recording their voice. So my computer's recording my voice. I'm actually speaking into the microphone, but at the same time holding the phone up to my ear, having the conversation. The other person A, is actually holding the phone up to their ear, having a conversation, and the digital recorder in front of them is recording it. So person A is going to send me, person B, the audio file. And let's see what this looks like. All right, so here we go. I'm person B with the very deep voice. But anyway, you get the idea. So person B is recording on their end. You can see over on the right-hand side, there's their recording. They have 3 little clips there. We focused on a little portion of the conversation, the beginning of the conversation. And then look at person A on the left. This person has, their audio. Now you'll notice those aren't the same. They may look it, but they're not the same at all. The one thing that is the same between these 2 files is what you see circled in yellow, and that is called sync audio. And this is something where I had my interviewee actually say something at the same time. So for example, I said, do me a favor and count to 5 with me. And so we both go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we might start off with a little, being off from one another, but by the time we get to 5, we're saying 5 at the same time. And that's our sync audio. This sync audio is something we do at the very beginning of the recording. And from that point forward, we can just go on and not worry about anything. The recorders on both ends the recording on both ends is going to take care of the rest. All right. So after the interview is over, person A brings in their audio into a editing software like Audacity, Adobe Audition. You could even do this in GarageBand if you wanted to. All right, and then you're going to take the audio from person B, and you're going to line up the sync audio. And you'll notice the sync audio, let's just say the little clip that you see there is where we said the number 5 at the same time. All right, we line those up perfectly so that when I hit play and I hear them, they actually say 5 at the same time. Mine, the blue is in the man's voice and the pink is in the woman's voice. And you'll notice that when the person B is talking, the line up there at the top is silent, and when the person A is talking, the line at the bottom is silent. That's because each person was only recording their own audio, and that's why it's important to sync it up. Now, once you've done that, then you would actually mix this down or just save it as a mono file or export it as a single recording. And then, of course, once you're finished with that, you can then delete that little audio clip of where you said 5 at the same time, or the sync audio. And then you have the recording. Now, once the file has been merged into a single recording where it now has both sides of the conversation, that's the point where you can begin editing it. Now, again, this is called a double ender. It's a lot of work. If you want to hear an episode of a double ender that I've done, you can go to gspn.tv/Steve Brown. Again, that's gspn.tv/Steve Brown. And that is a faith-based podcast episode that I did of a show called Encouraging Others Through Christ. It's episode number 131 of that show. And my interviewee, or my guest, if you will, for that show, because we had a conversation. It wasn't necessarily, it was an interview. Okay, it was an interview. Anyway, Steve Brown was on there, and he and I connected via Skype, but our Skype connection was horrible. But he is a radio broadcast host, and I could barely hear most of what he was saying, but he recorded everything on his end, and I did exactly what you see on this screen. I did a double ender, and it came out wonderfully. If you go to gspn.tv/Steve Brown, it'll point you right to that episode. All right, I do want to tell you there is another option. You could actually have both yourself and the other person dial into a conference calling service. There are a lot of free conference calling services out there that will record the entire conversation for you. It will record your audio and their audio. Both of you will sound like you're on the telephone. There's freeconferencecall.com, talkshoe.com, instanceteleSeminar.com, blogtalkradio.com. Those are all options. Things that I'm not usually a fan of. If you wanted to, you could actually use this service. You could actually be holding the telephone to your ear. You could record into your computer software or into a digital audio recorder and have just your side of the conversation, and have one of these free services recording both sides of the conversation. And then after the interview is done, you can then go to that service, download the audio file, and then do the same thing. You match up, sync up the audio to where when your voice is saying the same thing at the same time on both audio files. And then on the version of the audio that is recorded by this free conference calling service, every time you speak, you just go in and mute that part of the audio for that recording, which would then, by the end of the interview, would leave only the person who you interviewed, your interviewee's audio, left on that track. Then you can mix it down to a single track, if that makes sense. If not, then I would recommend probably using Call Recorder or Pamela and using Skype out to telephone if at all possible. And then, of course, there are in-the-field interviews. I want to say that you can actually get some wonderful in-the-field interviews with nothing more than just your Roland R-05 recorder. I absolutely love this thing and have done a ton of interviews with nothing more than that recorder, just sitting it on the table between me and my guest or my interviewee and just having a conversation. I like the fact that it has condenser microphones in certain situations where you're at a coffee shop or a restaurant. It gives you an ambient sound, or if you're at a conference and you're talking, you hear the conference goers in the background. Makes people feel like they're there, and it's kind of nice. Now, if you want to cut down on some of that background audio, you can use this XMV 105 cable, plug that into the mic input of the Roland recorder, and then plug the XLR port into a microphone. I just happen to be showing the ATR 2100 here. Anyway, you can use that microphone and then hold it up to you and talk into it, and then, of course, point it towards the other person that you're interviewing and go back and forth that way. One of the nice things about having a microphone in your hand is that if the person's a little bit talkative, you can always pull the microphone back and kind of say something without it being too rude. One thing, remember, anytime you're using that ATR 2100, remember to get a little windscreen, a little foam windscreen that goes around the ball of the top of that microphone. And then, of course, you could take the studio with you. In fact, if you look here, this is the Mackie 802 mixer. I mean, this thing's not a small mixer, but it's not huge. And they do actually make a bag for it. You can, I'm pretty sure I saw that you can get a Mackie 802 VLZ3 bag. And you can pack up your microphones really nice, pack up your recorder and your iPad mini and your cables, and you could just take this thing on the road with you, do live shows, set it up, all that stuff. You could take the entire studio with you, and that is an option as well. And well, my friends, that brings us to the end of this tutorial, the Podcaster's Guide to Recording Co-hosts, Guests, and Telephone Interviews. I hope this has been beneficial to you, that you'll be able to take this information, go out and create some wonderful content for your audience, and I wish you all the best that podcasting has to offer. Go ahead and take it out there, my friends. Put this information to use and take everything you do to the next level.